All right, we are live and kicking us off here. I'm Tiffany Edwards. I'm the Director of Business Advocacy for the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. So I want to welcome everybody to our virtual candidate forum featuring candidates for Lane County District Attorney. We have incumbent Patty Perlow and challenger James Cleavenger joining us tonight, and I will let them introduce themselves in a moment here. Also joining us, we have audience participants on Zoom, as well as our Facebook Live feed from the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce Facebook page. So I want to welcome everybody who's joining us tonight. And folks, if during the course of our forum here, you'd like to ask questions, feel free to type them into the question to the chat boxes there. And I should mention we've had many requests for questions already. So I'm going to try to do my best to get to as many as we can. So just in general, the Eugene Chamber is not currently providing any endorsements for the political races in the primary, but we are striving to become a better resource for our members and those who are interested in the candidates' values as they align with our business community. These webinars are open to anyone and they're free, and then they will be posted onto our website following the broadcast. The candidates have each completed an initial questionnaire, which can be viewed on the Chamber's website at eugenechamber.com. And like I mentioned, this forum will be recorded and available at the Chamber's website following the broadcast. Our format tonight, first we'll be having each candidate introduce themselves, and we'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. And then I will be asking 5 standard questions that the candidates have both seen ahead of time. And I'll take turns having each of you go first. So we'll alternate with that. And then with additional time, as I've mentioned, we'll go ahead and open up to questions submitted from the audience. And if you do have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box. This is our final candidate forum for the primary, the May primary. So they're all free, available to anyone, and will be recorded to the website post broadcast. So please visit the eugenechamber.com for all of that information. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and let Patty kick us off here by giving us a few minutes and just to talk about why you are, introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for re-election for District Attorney in Lane County.
All right, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you to the Eugene Chamber, and thank you to those of you who are watching this tonight, giving up your Thursday night for this, because it's really important. It matters. My name is Patty Perlow. I am your elected district attorney. I was appointed in 2015 after a contested appointment process. I was not anointed. I was elected in May of 2016 in a contested election, and with about 75% of the vote. I have run the office since that time. I have changed the office from being a siloed single department within Lane County to being a public safety partner with all agencies within the county. I have changed the culture of the office. I have changed the approach that we take toward criminal justice into more of a public safety perspective. And I have not completed all of the goals that I set for myself when I first took office. I've completed a number of them. We have a mental health treatment court now. We have we've brought the staff back up to full staffing, which was the first thing that needed to happen when I took office. And I still have a number of initiatives that I would like to see going forward, which is why I'm running this year for re-election. I would like to start a DUI court. I have to have the permission of the court to do that. I would like to create and work on more of the initiatives that I've been working on to help children in the community, to keep them out of the criminal justice system. And so those are the reasons that I am running, and I appreciate this opportunity very much to explain all of that to the people who are watching tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Patty. James, how about you? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell our audience why you're running for District Attorney?
Well, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you everyone that's watching and the Chamber of Commerce especially for putting this on. I'm James Cleavenger. I'm running for Lane County District Attorney to bring fairness, transparency, and trust back to our criminal justice system. I believe our current system is broken, and it's not reflective of our community's values and priorities. And I realize it's easy to sit back and criticize, but sometimes you have to do more than just criticize. Sometimes you have to be the change you want to see, and that's what's driven me to run for office. You know, I was involved in politics for a number of years in Chicago and left it because I didn't like politics. Never thought I would run myself after those experiences, but and some of them were good, but some of them were stranger. You know, my opponent's right. You know, she was appointed 6 years ago now. That appointment was by the governor. It was contested, but she was selected by her predecessor to fill that role. And usually the governor does rubber stamp those. And that's just been what our county had to deal with for almost 50 years, really. And it's true, she was opposed 4 years ago, and that's pretty rare. Normally, sitting DAs are not opposed when they run for re-election, and I think it says something that she has been opposed both times. That I think citizens are not satisfied with the status quo, and that's what I aim to do is to change that. I've been a Lane County resident now for 15 years, licensed attorney for 11, and then in law enforcement for over a decade now. In the role as law enforcement, I've worked for 3 different communities: Junction City, Coburg, and now Oak Ridge. So it's given me a breadth of knowledge to what small communities in Lane County want, and what that is fairness. I'm all about treating everyone equally. Yes, Ms. Perlow has started some great alternative programs, but they haven't really been readily available for some of those small communities. It seems, in our experience, that those are only utilized by Eugene citizens, and I think that should be broadened to allow everyone to be able to use those alternative courts. I also want to increase transparency of the office, and I think we also need to focus the limited financial resources we do have into, you know, increased mental health treatment, drug addiction treatment, because that's what our community is facing, and we need to deal with that. And generally, I just want to improve relationships with our community partners. So I think I'm up.
Okay. Great. Thank you, James. Appreciate that. So we're going to start the standard questions, and I'm going to have you start us off first, and then we'll alternate, and Patty can start this next question. So same question for both of you. James, what do you believe best qualifies you for the role of district attorney for Lane County?
Well, I think it's my diversity of experience. You know, it's true I don't have 31 years as a prosecutor, Ms. Perlow does. What I do have is years of experience working with people. You know, I've again served over 10 years now on the streets as a police officer. Most of that time was as a volunteer, part-time reserve police officer. So same powers as a regular police officer, only I'm not getting paid for it at the time. I've also been, you know, as I said, a licensed attorney for 11 years, starting in 2009. And I do have experience in court. For the last 10 years or so as a police officer, we have the ability to take cases to the municipal courts of Coburg, Junction City, and now Oak Ridge. And I've had a pretty strong record of winning cases that the DA's office has deemed unwinnable and didn't want to prosecute. Now, obviously, I don't win all the time. That's because I'm willing to take risks and give people the opportunity to have their day in court and try to seek justice. I also have experience working in the jails. I work part-time in Serbu with the youth correctional facility. Been volunteering in community boards, public safety advisory group at U of O, and then my work in politics in Chicago. You know, I lobbied for property tax reform legislation with a young state senator at the time by the name of Barack Obama, who didn't cross my mind he would become president someday. But strange experience now, because I was actually telling him what to do and what to say in Springfield, Illinois. But I think that will be helpful as we face budget shortfalls and need to seek new funding. And then just generally courage. I was a whistleblower about police misconduct in my own department, and it shows that I'm willing and able to stand up for what is right.
Great. Thanks, James. Patty, same question of you. What do you believe best qualifies you for the role of district attorney for Lane County?
Well, number one would be experience. I am the district attorney. I have worked in this office for over 30 years. I have tried every level of case from misdemeanor through felony, including aggravated murder, rape, elder abuse, child abuse. I have supervised trial teams. I have mentored the new lawyers in this office. I've done every job in the office, including answering the phones, except for working over in the family law division. And I've been supervising that division since 2009 and have learned I couldn't do that work with the knowledge I have, but I certainly can supervise the work that they do over there. And I've learned federal regulations, state regulations, and all for that. I supervise the 3 divisions. I manage the $11 million budget. I've leveraged grants to get the staff back up to full capacity. I have done everything to change the culture of the office. I have changed relationships in the community. I have integrity. I have honesty. I have fairness. I've expanded programs, including our treatment courts. I have been a proponent of our treatment courts. Those actually are my favorite event when going into graduation, to get people actually out of the criminal justice system and celebrate their successes. I have received Justice Reinvestment Initiative money to create a program to divert people from prison who are high-risk property offenders with intensive supervision. I have worked on a low-level diversion program, and also have held people accountable for the crimes they commit and serviced victims for all of these thousands of cases that come through the office. We enforce every victim's constitutional rights. And so I would say experience, honesty, integrity, and fairness are the reasons why I would be a good district attorney, or continuing in that role.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Right at 2 minutes. Look at that. Patty, I'll have you start this next question first. So, Patty, what do you believe is the biggest challenge currently facing Lane County, and how, as the district attorney, would you propose to address it?
So my answer would have been different about 2 months ago. It would have been mental illness and homelessness. Right now, it is an economic crash, and so the greatest challenge facing Lane County is how we are going to keep the county functioning, recognizing that property tax assessments or the collections are going to be down this year. And so how the county is going to maintain services, how my office is going to continue to function, given the trying to come out of this economic crisis that we're currently in, and that is for the foreseeable future we're going to be in. Going back to what used to be our #1 crisis, mental health and homelessness, we've been trying to address that. The state continues to put the responsibilities on the counties to address those issues and to find solutions to get people who are mentally ill out of the criminal justice system. And ultimately, what this county needs is a crisis center, and we need to have funding for it. We need to continue. The county is already building programmed housing for people who suffer from mental illness, because as we learned with the mental health court, if people are not housed, they don't come to court, they don't go to treatment, they can't take care of their basic needs. And so there are a number of things that we need to do to address that. Before COVID, 60% of the population of the Lane County Jail had a mental illness issue. That is our largest treatment facility in the county. So I would say right now, we've got a couple of really big issues that we're going to need to address. And to say which one is our highest priority, I would put getting out of our financial crisis first, and then using what resources we get for that to deal with our mental health and homelessness problem.
Great. Thank you. So James, same question. What do you believe is our biggest challenge here in Lane County, and how, as the district attorney, would you propose to address it?
Well, Ms. Perlow's right. You know, the economy is definitely going to crash, and we need to come up with better ways to find that funding that we're going to need, because the courts are obviously an essential service. We also need to reopen the courts in such a way that they can still function. And I realize this is not Ms. Perlow's fault, but the courts need to be more receptive to the idea of doing more hearings like we're doing now, you know, through platforms online, because, you know, victims that need to get a restraining order still need to get those restraining orders, and, you know, people still need to be sentenced, et cetera. So we need to be more progressive in that realm and get that going sooner rather than later, because who knows how long this is going to last or if it will come back. In order to find that the alternative funding sources, it's going to require building those relationships with our state elected officials, which has been an issue in the past with Ms. Perlow not supporting some bipartisan legislation that I think broke some of those bridges, and I'd like to repair those. And she's right, you know, she's been working on trying to get a crisis center for six years now, and I just think it's about time we actually do it. You know, we need those services now. Same thing with mental health and drug addiction treatment services. You know, those need to be available. I take people to jail all the time. It's a long ride from Oak Ridge, and we have these discussions, and these people actually do want help, but they can't get the help if they're not charged with the drug crimes to mandate the drug addiction services, and that's just not happening in our small communities, and so that needs to be fairer.
Okay, great, perfect timing. I'll let you start us off on the next question. So James, what role can the district attorney play in promoting economic development for our region?
Well, I hate to be cliche, but you know, it takes a village, right? And there's a butterfly effect, if you want, two cliches. It really is all connected. Part of livability in a community is reducing crime rates, reducing rates of drug use. You know, nobody wants to go to the park. They're just syringes all over the place. It is all connected, and I've suggested that we involve the community with the DA's office by starting a citizens advisory group that would meet with the DA once a month to give input on policy ideas, look at the data, which I would like to collect and release so we can use it to identify problems. And then just generally with economic development, we need to buy local. You know, in the questionnaire that you sent me, I suggested that any purchasing done by the DA's office, which again, yeah, there's $11 million in that budget. If a local company is willing to bid on something, even if it's 5% higher than the lowest bid, it should still go to that local business to keep us going.
Great. Patty, same question for you. What role does the district attorney play in promoting economic development for our region?
Well, first I would say government has purchasing rules that we have to follow. We don't get to just choose who we buy from. We have to follow the rules. But with regard to economic development, public safety is the basis of economic development. If people don't feel safe in the community, we aren't going to have talent moving in. We aren't going to have people with the skills we need to fill the jobs moving in here. And we'll have people leaving the area to go look elsewhere. And so for economic development, we need to support the businesses in the community. We need to keep the talent in the community. And public safety is a prime component of that. For economic development, we need to make people feel safe as they go downtown to shop and to support our local businesses. And so I would say one of the things I mentioned in my questionnaire is the Public Safety Coordinating Council. And interestingly enough, that actually was started by business people in Lane County. And now there's no one sitting on that council from the business community. And so that's an important aspect to consider as we're making public safety policy, is to bring back the business community onto that council and into making decisions about what would be supporting the economy, public safety, and the businesses of Lane County.
Great. Right, thank you. So Patty, again, I'll have you start this question. So what skills do you have in managing a budget, and what considerations would you make in the very likely scenario of budget cuts?
So unfortunately, I've been involved in the scenario of budget cuts. In 2012, we lost 1/3 of our staff. And that was precisely because the economy here is always a little bit behind the rest of the nation and the state. And so we were late to be affected by the 2008 recession, and we were late to recover from it. And so I was involved in the decision-making process about what we were going to do with that. And we laid off or lost to other positions 1/3 of the staff. And part of that included losing people who were experienced attorneys because their salaries were higher, and we could save more people and do more work by making those decisions. It was terrible, and I would never want to do that again. And then to recover involved getting a lot of grants to replace those positions in the office. And of course, grant funding is not sustainable. It's a great start, but it's not sustainable. And those grants have continued to step down or run out, and we've had to continue to find funding. The general fund has been in great condition while the economy was great. And yes, we are likely going to be facing budget problems in the next year. I am continuing to look for grants that are available, because the last thing we want to do is go through that situation again. I've also maintained a vacancy in the lawyers that I am funded for in my budget, because I don't want to hire somebody in that position and then have to lay them off. And so we've been generating a significant amount of lapse from having that position vacant, and that money will be available for the general fund going forward.
Great. Hey, James, how about you? What skills do you have in managing a budget, and what considerations would you make in the likely scenario of budget cuts?
Yeah, I think you're right. There definitely will be budget cuts. And first thing I want to say right off the bat is that I'd be willing to cut my own salary by 25% if that would help in those budget cuts. You know, I took a 50% cut when I left the federal court, working for Judge McShane at the U.S. District Court, and became a police officer. So obviously I'm not particularly driven by money myself, and I'm willing to help out however I can. In terms of managing budgets, you know, when I worked in Chicago, I was the interim director of the Tax Policy Forum. I drafted 2 successful MacArthur Foundation grants. They were over $1 million. And I've also been used by some of the police chiefs that I've worked for over the years to help them with some of their budget considerations. They find out pretty quickly that I'm an attorney and I can help. So I've worked on aspects of those budgets to help them. You know, and Perlow said there are purchasing rules that affect how you can purchase things. I realize that, but those rules can be changed. And if you have good partnerships with elected officials, you can change those rules. And that's something I'd like to do. Obviously, we're going to need to get more alternative funding to support the programs that we now have and to build the new ones. But in general, I'd rely on the experts. There are accountants and budget managers within the office. You know, I'm not going to turn everything upside down when I become DA and stop people from receiving their paychecks. Some of that just kind of works itself out. I think my role would be moving forward in getting additional funding to cover some of the shortfalls. So yeah.
Okay. All right, so James, I'll have you answer our last prepared question first, and then I'll go to Patty, and then we'll start taking questions from the audience. So how does the work of the district attorney contribute to a healthy economy and thriving business community? And what would you propose to improve on any existing areas of improvement?
Well, it's kind of similar to the previous question. You know, we all are in this together. Livability is a big issue because that's what is driving people and businesses to move here. And a big part of that is our crime rates. And so that is an issue that the DA has an ability to affect. Again, I'd like to have input directly from citizens on the Citizens Advisory Committee so that I'm understanding what community needs and expects from the DA. Again, I believe it is the DA position it's not a kingdom. It is, you know, you're a public servant as the DA, and you should be listening to the public as much as possible. You know, the issues come up every once in a while. The Elkhorn brewery incident where you had protesters, to some accounts, kidnapping people, not letting them leave. I don't know how much of that was accurate, but of course, nothing was prosecuted. And again, that's not the DA's office's fault. That went to Muni Court in Eugene. But, you know, I've been involved in civil protests myself, including crossing lines sometimes where I knew there was a risk that could get arrested if I committed a crime. And I think everyone should be treated fairly. And if people are breaking the law by going into private businesses and staging those kind of protests, that they should face consequences. That's not, there's plenty of places to protest. You can protest right out on the street, on the sidewalk, and have the same effect. But to close down businesses, I think, is just not healthy for the economy or for our society in general. We've got to live in a civil society, and laws need to be enforced fairly.
Okay. Patty, same question. How does the work of the district attorney contribute to a healthy economy and thriving business community? And what would you propose to improve on any existing areas for improvement?
Well, I already mentioned that having somebody from the business community sit on the policy board that makes the decisions about how money we receive from the state is going to be spent and what our priorities are going to be, the strategic plan for public safety. So all of that would be really helpful to have a voice from the business community who can represent the needs of the business community, and we can make those considerations as we generate policy. The DA's office is directly responsible for protecting the rights of businesses who've been victims of crime. We have a number of businesses that have burglaries, UUVs, trespass, embezzlements, where somebody who works inside the business, and if you want to talk about an economic disaster, that is when somebody on the inside of a business is stealing sometimes as much as a couple $100,000 of a small business. And so my office is there to prosecute, to make sure the person is held accountable who does that, and to try to seek restitution for the business in each of these crimes that are committed to make them whole. You know, oftentimes the person who's committed the crime doesn't have adequate resources to make the business whole, but at least there is some level of accountability for the conduct that's committed. I think the relationship, I mean, the people who work in my office all live here, and I have a vested interest, as I've lived here since 1986, and have a vested interest in having a strong, healthy economy. When we have a strong, healthy economy, then the county government can function at full capacity. And so it really is an interrelated relationship, and we have to support each other in order to make my office strong, to make the economy strong, to make people feel safe in the community.
Okay, great. All right, so those were my questions. And now I have some that have come in, and I want to just mention to folks, feel free to type in questions. I'd love it if people could try to gear them towards having both candidates be able to answer them, because I'm going to try to make sure that I spread them out a bit so that they are either both able to address the question, or we can kind of alternate questions that are directed at different candidates. So got a couple of questions that were submitted beforehand. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about your campaigns. One of the questions was that obviously both of your campaigns are very high profile. And I think folks are interested in understanding, so where are some of your endorsements coming from? Where are some of your supporters? And why in general are they supporting you? And I'll let Patty start.
Well, I have a really broad base of support. It includes the Democratic Party of Lane County, AFSCME, all 5 county commissioners, the assessor, the sheriff, so all of the elected officials of Lane County. It includes the police associations from Florence, Eugene, and Springfield. It includes the mayor of Cottage Grove, former mayor of Westford. It's a really broad base, and includes retired district attorney Doug Harkleroad, retired Lane County Circuit Court Judge Lyle Velour, individuals. It's a really broad base, and I'm gratified by the level of support I've achieved, because I had to try to match the single source $100,000 in my opponent's campaign. And at this point with in-kind, I am at about $98,000 that has come in from individual donors and in-kind contributions.
Great, thank you. James, how about you? Talk to us a little bit about some of your contributors, supporters, and why are they supporting you in this race?
Sure. Well, first, I would take issue with her claim that she has all the elected officials of Lane County. She does not. She has all the commissioners, yes, but a single statewide elected official endorsing her, which again shows that those relationships have been broken. It should be easy for the incumbent to get all of those endorsements, because you'd be working with those people for years, but she doesn't. It's a lot harder for someone coming in to get those endorsements, because people are scared. What's the blowback going to be? What's the retaliation going to be if you lose? Because it's I am the underdog. There's no question. I'm not the incumbent, but I do have quite a few endorsements. 3 different mayors, a couple of chiefs of police. And other community groups, and you're welcome to see those on my website. It's clevengerforda.com if you want to see the full list. As for the money, yeah, it's true. I got a big donation from a friend of mine. He's a real estate investor and broker, and it's actually not $100,000. It was a $50,000 donation, a $50,000 loan, and I've raised a lot more on top of that too. From little people, I've been getting donations of $5. I think I counted, there were like 20 of those donations from people that donated $5. And I'm touched by those almost as much as I was touched by my friend willing to donate $50,000. And there's no strings attached on this. He's a guy who's a reserve police officer like me. So he certainly didn't need to do that job, but his life on the line for free. And he's independently wealthy. He's just a good altruistic person like myself, and was willing to make that investment in the community. And that's how he viewed it. And he's made statements about it before, that it's not me that he's giving the money to, it's the community that he's giving the money to, because he wants to see things fixed. I should also mention, I'm taking no corporate money, zero. So no money from businesses, law firms, etc. If you look on the Secretary of State's website, Ms. Perlow has a lot of money from businesses, big businesses, corporations, etc. And I have not taken that. All my money is from individuals, 99% of whom live here in Lane County. My mother insisted on donating some. She lives in Washington State. So there's your out-of-state money. My sister too. But I think that's important, and to note that money is local.
Okay. I'm going to ask a follow-up question that just came to me based on that, and I'll let both of you answer that. James, I'd be curious to ask. Obviously, we're the Chamber of Commerce. We represent the business community. So the question would be for both of you: why not, or why would you feel that way about taking support from businesses?
Well, I think it's like The Godfather. You've got Luca Brasi, right, who did all the work for The Godfather. When Ms. Perlow sends in whoever she sends in to some law firm to say, hey, would you like to donate to the district attorney? Can they really say no? I don't know. I think that there's some strings attached there that I didn't want to be beholden to. There are a lot of law firms that obviously practice in court. And I just didn't want to have any of that influence over my head at all. So that's why I decided not to corporate or business money.
Okay. Patty, I'd be curious of your response on that. Would you be willing to take donations or contributions from the business community? And if so, why or why not?
I've actually had strong support from the business community, and it's nothing like The Godfather. And I don't have any thugs going out and strong arming people. I've made so many phone calls individually to people and to businesses to seek their support in this very important race. And it's not that the DA is a policymaker. I don't make legislation. I don't make laws. I can't affect taxes. I can't affect fees. I represent the people of Lane County as a public servant who enforces the law and tries to do good in the community. And so I support the business community, and I'm gratified the business community is supporting me back. And the same with the lawyers in the community. So many of the lawyers who have contributed, I didn't even contact. They thought this race was important enough that they have individually sent checks in. And so it is absolutely not anything related to what The Godfather is like. It is about the community stepping up and recognizing how very important this race is. And I'm gratified by the support I've received from all walks of life.
Great. Thank you. So I have another question here, shifting gears a little bit. The state and federal governments, and Patty, I'll have you start with your answer, but I'll have you both answer this. So the state and federal governments sometimes propose changes that would affect district attorneys. How would you deal with these challenges and build support to make sure your voice is heard?
So the state legislature can make changes that affect district attorneys because we are a statutory position, and so I have to recognize that is the authority that the state has. And the federal government, while they may make policy and law that affects criminal prosecution in general, search and seizure and all of that, it doesn't really impact the local district attorney. But yeah, the relationships obviously matter. The relationships with the legislature and the ODAA, the Oregon District Attorneys Association, have not been great because we have clashed heads on a number of pieces of legislation. And we've been making a lot of effort to repair those relationships, but it's going to happen when people who are not subject matter experts are passing legislation that impacts the work we do without getting input from the subject matter experts on the effects of the legislation that are being passed. And so I would hope that I do actually have good relationships with some of our local legislators, and they do listen to me. I would hope that the people who are making these decisions that impact the criminal justice system in such a sweeping way would want to have a conversation with me before making those decisions.
Great. James, how about you? Same question. What would you do to deal with the challenges of our state and federal governments, sometimes, proposing changes that would impact the office of the district attorney?
Yeah, well, obviously, sometimes you have to roll with the punches, and there are changes to laws that you may not see coming. Some of them we should have seen coming. I mean, this change that was brought down from the U.S. Supreme Court on unanimous juries, well, we're the only state left not doing that, and it just, the writing was on the wall, and we should have been prepared for that in advance. And I would disagree with my opponent that the DA can't affect state and federal laws. I think you can if you are on the forefront of reform and change, and you're actually working with the state legislators to bring about that change and reform. There's no reason that you can't get involved and like I said, be on the forefront of this and make those changes.
Okay. All right, another question. I will start with James on this question. Sometimes candidates don't have any prior government experience, and some voters obviously find that appealing. To what extent do you believe that experience matters in the DA race?
I think experience does matter, but the type of experience, people have been harping on me on, not being a full-fledged prosecutor. The DA herself hasn't been in court for 5-6 years. The role of the DA is to direct the office, set policy, set standards. You're not in court yourself. And that being said, I have been in court. I worked for 4.5 years as a judicial clerk, which, I really wish they would have a different name for that, because there's no clerical duties involved in that. It's all legal research and writing, and you're drafting opinions for the court that become law. So, I'm in court all the time in that role when I worked in that job. And I'm having to make those decisions to draft those opinions for the judge, and they've got to be solid because they're going to be scrutinized and become law. So I have that experience, in civil and criminal cases. And then, of course, I have experience taking cases to the municipal courts, and I realize those are smaller courts, but same ideas. You're still presenting your arguments to the judge, still making motions. I mean, it's the same deal. It's just it's a fast food restaurant versus a white tablecloth sort of restaurant. But the basic experience I do have.
Great. All right, Patty, same question. Sometimes candidates don't have prior government experience, and voters find that appealing. But to what extent do you believe that experience matters in the DA race?
So when your lawyer comes to you with a serious violent crime case, a rape case, a homicide, and wants to talk about resolution of that case, you have to have had experience actually prosecuting and trying those cases to know what the evidence that they have, how to assess the evidence that they have, and how to determine what a just outcome is in that particular case. You have to have somebody who's able to mentor and train the lawyers in the office. Your name, my name, is on every document that gets filed in court. I am personally responsible for every action that happens in this office. And so to have somebody without any experience say, oh, well, the office is going to run itself, and we have experienced people who are going to be able to take care of everything themselves, that's not how it works. And I know my opponent has said that he's going to go personally and train police agencies, and he doesn't have any experience to go and train police agencies. And I'm curious if one of the tactics that he would take to the police agencies is putting a blanket over a chimney to smoke somebody out. As far as I know, that is not an approved tactic anywhere for law enforcement. He has zero understanding of search and seizure law. And so to have somebody with that level of inexperience and terrible judgment running an office that has this much impact on the community, affecting people's rights both as criminal defendants and as victims is, yeah, experience really does matter.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to ask a question that's come up here because it's kind of relevant. So, and I'm going to give both of you the opportunity to answer this question because I think that you both can speak to it. So Patty, I'll let you start. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've changed the culture in the time that you've been in the role of DA, the culture in the office?
So I can take this back even further than that. When I first started in this office, women, well, I was told women cost the office more. So I made sure I was the first person in the office every single day, that my kids were dropped off at daycare early, and I got here before everybody else and stayed. Lawyers in the office sometimes even rooted for each other not to succeed. It was a culture that really needed changing, and it has evolved dramatically over the past 30 years. Since I've taken leadership of this office, we are far more family friendly. It's encouraging people who have challenges in their lives with scheduling, that have kids, that have people in their relationships that have vulnerabilities that need to be protected. So I have changed it into we don't have to be so rigid. We want to be a place that people want to come to work. And this is a team. I have changed the culture from the lawyers versus the support staff to the lawyers understanding that nothing they do in this office can be successful without honoring and recognizing the hard work of the support staff for all of us to be successful. We are a team here. We are not an us and them. And so that's been a dramatic culture change. And my enthusiasm for our treatment courts is new to this office. The thought that people in the community can and should be getting out of the criminal justice system, and celebrating the successes when they do, and recognizing the hard work that it takes to get them out of the criminal justice system. And yes, I wish more people would go through our treatment courts, but with the change from the legislature to make controlled substances a misdemeanor, there's less incentive for people to do that.
Okay, great. James, I'm going to let you answer the question slightly differently. I'll ask it a little differently. So if you were to be elected to the office of district attorney, what changes, cultural changes, would you prioritize making?
Well, I think my opponent's right in that she has changed the culture, but I think she's changed it for the worse. The turnover rate has gone up recently. You know, we receive a new list of assistant DAs about every 2 months because somebody's left. And I've been receiving quite a few emails from people within the office that are not pleased with what's going on. Yeah, there's an issue. There's no diversity in the office. There are no, assistant DAs of color, and there seems to be no actual attempts to change that. There's a lot of problems that I would like to fix, and I would like to change the culture. There's a sense of fear from some of the people that I talk to that work there, that they're afraid of losing. They might get fired, so therefore they're only taking cases that are slam dunks, and I don't believe that's just at all. The situation with Judge Mooney and trying to get her off the court. I've read accounts from people in the office about how that took place, that, assistant DAs were told to write notes about every hearing they had with the judge to, create a dossier on her to try to get her off the court. And then did try to get her off the court, and the judge recused herself to keep the peace. And then, of course, the governor promoted her to the State Court of Appeals. And just some of that, I don't know, it's kind of underhanded to do that. And I know Judge Mooney, and she's a wonderful person, and the fact that her integrity and ability to be fair was ever questioned was unfair.
All right, thank you. Right on time. All right, so I'm going to ask another question here. I've got a bunch that are up in the chat, so I'm going to try to shift gears here for a minute. This question is one that I believe both of you can answer. So Oregon consistently incarcerates minorities and at higher rates than white Oregonians. What role should the DA play in monitoring and promoting racial equity within the criminal justice system? James, I'll let you start.
Well, I would love to know, but the DA won't collect or release the data. So we don't know the extent of Lane County's problems with this issue. And that's something that I've made a campaign issue of, is that we need the data. We need to collect it, and we need to be transparent and release it.
Okay. Patty, I'll let you answer. I'll let you address that and perhaps answer the same question. What role should the DA play in monitoring the promotion of racial equity within the criminal justice system?
So that's a complicated question because we receive cases that are investigated by law enforcement. We don't initiate any investigations. And so the racial makeup of the cases that come into the office are not under our control. I have run the statistics and I have presented the statistics. They're not particularly useful in the form they are. I can tell you that every year about 90% of the cases we prosecute are white people because Lane County is predominantly white people. For the last couple of years, Latinx has been underrepresented in prosecution, and African Americans are a little bit above the percentage of the racial makeup that they make in the community, but because there are so few people of African American heritage or racial makeup, it's statistically insignificant, that little bit of difference. One person changes dramatically what your percentage is. And so I can't control what comes in through the door and what we prosecute. I can review it, and I can tell you that people from minority backgrounds are victimized at a much higher rate in our county than white people are, based upon their racial makeup and demographic of Lane County. So we can track it, but it's not helpful because I can't say we will prosecute 15 cases of this particular ethnic or racial background, and then when we get to case 16, it's a homicide, and we're going to say, oh, you don't get prosecuted because that's increasing the representation. So I think what we need to do is go back to the community and get people out of the criminal justice system from all racial makeups, protect our victims of all racial makeups. And actually we need to start like at age 3, working with children if we want to really make a difference.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask both of you this question as well. Slightly, you'll have obviously speak to it differently because you're in different roles. But Oregon recently updated transparency laws impacting county DA's offices. What changes, and Patty, I'll let you start. What changes have you made or would you plan to make in response to the increased demands for public information?
So I'm not really sure what the basis of that question is. There was legislation in the 2019 session that requires district attorneys in Oregon to put more information on their websites about policies. And we are complying with that for the policies that we have in place. With regard to the notion that we're going to release video or information on officer-involved shootings, that would be reckless. And I know my opponent says that he would do that immediately, but that would mean that Any potential witnesses would have all the information ahead of time before they've even been interviewed. That is completely reckless. Any criminal investigation requires integrity in the investigation and making sure that when you talk to witnesses, they aren't influenced by outside information, and that the evidence collected is complete. And remember that video is from one perspective. And so until you've talked to people and found out what they saw, releasing video is reckless and impairs the integrity of your criminal investigation. And as as a police officer, I would think that my opponent would know that.
Okay, well, I will give James an opportunity to address the same question. So, you know, what would your plan be to make in response to the increased demands for public information?
My question back to Ms. Perlow is, well, why are other counties doing it quicker than we are? The release of information is quicker in other counties. I'm not saying you have to immediately, as in within minutes, release those videos. You know, I'm not stupid. You know, I realize you've got to preserve the investigation, but you can release things a lot sooner, and you can also let police departments release their own press statements. You know, you're going to have a tainted jury through media input regardless, because by the time you get to trial on something major, we're talking 2 years, and it's not like the story's not going to come out within those 2 years. So to me, stuff should come out a lot sooner. And I think my opponent has a lot of problems with transparency. You know, I've had these complaints filed with the Oregon State Bar and the Secretary of State by not Patty Perlow herself, but I'm sure she has involvement in it. You know, they are her major campaign contributors and former colleagues. And they're coming out the same day, and they're coordinated with each other, referencing each other's letters. I mean, that's not transparent at all to have your minions do your work for you. So I'd love to know what her involvement with those complaints was, and obviously they're well timed, so they'll hang over my head during this election because wheels of justice spin slow, and then I won't be exonerated in time for the election for it to be determined that I am a true attorney. But of course, I am a licensed and active attorney in 2 states. People can check that out themselves. I've had no bar complaints at all until now, unlike my opponent who's had 5. So yeah, and to address some of these allegations, I've tried to release information such as the actual reports regarding that cabin fire incident, which her campaign manager put in a request for at our department 2 days after I ran. He didn't disclose that he was Perlow's campaign manager or had any connection to her, but I'm able to figure that out because I investigated it. So he got that information, and then I tried to release it to the public, and then all of a sudden we get a call from Lane County Sheriff's Office saying, "Oh no, you can't release that." And of course they were redacted, but you want transparency? I'm trying to give you transparency. And
okay, great.
It should be released.
Thanks, James. I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer this next question first. As a citizen, much of what the district attorney does is not obvious to a lot of folks. Can you maybe speak to some of the work? What does the DA do, and that impacts citizens that they might not already know?
Well, apparently there's a lot of meetings because she's not in the office a lot. I know my boss sometimes tries to call her, and she's hard to track down. Because you do have a lot of irons in the fire because you're dealing with, you've got the medical examiner's office as part of the purview, family law, victim services, death investigations, criminal prosecutions, victim services. Yeah, there's a lot. So is that the general question? Someone wanted to know if I knew what was involved in the office I decided to run for. Well,
I don't know. I think it's more of just a question about, for the average Joe out there that just doesn't actually have a real thorough sense of what the DA does. I think that's kind of what they're looking for, is just an answer to what does the DA do? Patty, if you want to go ahead and, I mean, obviously you're the acting DA, maybe you can answer that question. I'll give you 2 minutes. What do you need me to repeat it? What kind of, can you speak to some of the work that the DA does?
So the DA is the elected official for the particular county, tasked with being the chief law enforcement officer for that county. Involved in that is making decisions about running an office, and also the going out into the community and engaging and making policy and all of that. Within the office, the DA's office, yes, does criminal prosecution. That's the thing that people are most aware of. We get somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 cases a year from the 11 law enforcement agencies in Lane County. They're reviewed by the 23 lawyers in the criminal division, the 1 lawyer at juvenile, and a charging decision is made. The DA is ultimately responsible for every charge that is filed and for every outcome in every case, personally responsible for all of those decisions. We also, not every DA's office has death investigations. Lane County has made a decision to put that in my office. And so I oversee the investigation of about 1,200 deaths a year. Family law, not every DA's office does support enforcement, but it's important to me that we have $20 million going back to Lane County children. We have unfunded mandates from the legislature to do civil commitment proceedings, to do public records appeals, to review people trying to get relief from sex offender registration and their driving privileges back. All of that happens within the DA's office, and I am personally responsible for overseeing all of that and making sure that my lawyers are properly trained and exercising their discretion with good judgment. And then I am, yes, in lots and lots of meetings. And I didn't know that my opponent was ever trying to reach me because he never left a message, but I have indeed gone to a lot of meetings.
Well, I feel your pain there. I go to a lot of meetings myself, so I understand that you're still doing a lot of stuff when you're in meetings. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question along the lines of training. Patty, I'll ask you to answer first. So do you think it's important to manage the district attorney's office in a way that provides training and support to staff?
Yes, that is imperative, and particularly in a field where people have a lot of discretion and are making their own calls on things that affect the civil rights and of people who are getting charged with crime. And so for our training purposes, the DA's Association puts on what we call Baby DA School for our brand new lawyers every fall. And then within the office, we have the prosecution clinic for the U of O. And so we have people in the office who are able to train people up from the clinic level, but also within the office so that they are prepared to be good stewards of the public and making good charging decisions and taking the right cases to trial. I have very experienced supervisors of each of the trial teams, and they make sure that all of the cases, particularly between the 2 general teams that have the misdemeanor lawyers, they work very well together to make sure that the new lawyers have exactly the same information and are treating each case the same, so that there isn't any claim later that somebody was treated differently because a different lawyer handled the case. We send the lawyers out to specialized training for car crashes, reconstruction school, because that is a particularly complicated area of law. Send the domestic violence team to specialized training, send the major crimes team to specialized training, send the misdemeanor lawyers to DV training, DUI training, everything that's available, because over time it has become such a specialized field, criminal prosecution, and the law is changing constantly. And so we have to make sure that everybody is up to speed on that. And the support staff has training requirements, and our software requires training for the people who maintain it for us. And so, yeah, there is a lot of training, and that's a big part of the materials and services budget, is making sure the lawyers in the office and the support staff are trained and prepared to do their jobs.
Great. James, I'll let you weigh in on this as well. Do you think it's important for the DA's office to run in a way that provides training for staff?
Yeah,
have thoughts on that?
Important at all levels, and it's required by the Oregon State Bar to do your continuing legal educations in general. But going back to the idea of police training, what my commitment was in my platform is that I would personally go to every small agency once a year to do little updates. It's not only to do that legal training for the officers, but it's also just to meet people. Again, in my 10 years in law enforcement, I've never seen the DA step foot in any of our small town police departments, and that's just not not fair. And there aren't that many of them in Lane County, so it's probably a week worth of my time. But the idea that I'm totally not qualified to teach is strange to me, because I've been asked to teach at the University of Oregon School of Law in classes including trial practice, mock court, et cetera, for 5 years. I taught at the Lane County Sheriff's Department Reserve Academy, the law courses there. And the idea that I don't know search and seizure law, okay, but I'm writing those opinions for 4 years in federal court. It's pretty heavy into search and seizure law, but we can disagree on that, I'm sure. But the fact that I've been asked to teach at the law school, at the Reserve Academy, that I graduated in one of my class from that academy, and I've got 2 law degrees, not just one. I would think that I have the education and experience to be able to help others. And I still am a field training officer responsible for training new officers. And I became an FTO when I was still a reserve police officer part-time. And I think I'm still the only reserve officer to have gone through that training. And then, of course, most recently, did a week-long program at the Academy through the Oregon Chiefs of Police Association for their leadership training. It's mostly chiefs or captains, but I was invited to that as well and graduated from that program as well. So the idea that I'm, completely incompetent is, well, I think simply false.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to let you answer this question first. So there was a statistic thrown out that I can't confirm. It's just a question. So maybe you could both speak to this, that it implies that 25% of the cases that are brought forward are being prosecuted. Can both of you, I'd love to hear from both of you to speak to your knowledge of that metric and where it might come from. Do you know it to be accurate or not? So James, what do you know about that?
Well, I think it may have come from something I said, that about 25% I think would be high of the cases in Oak Ridge that we send to the DA's office are prosecuted. It's kind of bizarre how she'll play with the numbers. She wrote something on her Facebook that she processed, I think she said, like 120 cases last year. Well, that's curious because we only sent 85, I think it was. So I don't know where she got the 130. And processed is different than prosecuting. We kind of joke that the DA's office is where cases go to die. A lot of times we have no idea what happens to our cases. We don't get a no-file letter explaining why it wasn't prosecuted. We have no idea if anything's happening. And then sometimes, well, bizarrely, yesterday I got a request for follow-up investigation on a case that we turned in over a year ago to get another interview in, but the victim's dead. So there can't really be a whole lot done with that. And to get the letter a year later is just kind of strange. So I did the investigation. I did the interview with someone who said, I have no idea what happened 15 months ago. yeah, so they're not getting prosecuted, and it's worse for small towns. As far as the overall statistics for the county, again, we have no idea because we don't have we won't release it. So we don't know what the real prosecution rates are. All I can tell you is that I know they're smaller in small towns.
Okay. Well, Patty, I'll give you the opportunity to respond to that. What do you know about the number of cases, percentage-wise or otherwise? I'll just let you go ahead and respond to that.
All right, so we prosecute viable cases where there's sufficient evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, as I mentioned, we get between 6,000 and 7,000 cases a year from the 11 law enforcement agencies in Lane County. And we file between 4,500 and 5,000 of those. And the ones that aren't filed are the ones that there isn't sufficient evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. It would be unethical for us to be filing charges against people where we couldn't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And for the smaller agencies, I acknowledge that it's difficult for them. They are under-resourced. They have a hard time recruiting and retaining talent. When they find somebody who comes in there and is a successful investigator, that person often leaves for a larger agency and more money. And so, yes, the smaller agencies are really challenged on that. And so I acknowledge that we offer police legal advice 24 hours a day with somebody on pager at night. We offer to go to the agencies and provide training. We're going to Cottage Grove and providing training at the request of Chief Shepherd. He's asked us to review his reports and give feedback back so that we can tell the officers what they need to be doing. When it's requested of us, we actually do that. But I also recognize that the small agencies don't have a lot of people working on duty at any given time, and it's hard for them to have people go to training. And so it's a situation where we have the ability to help to a certain extent, but we can't prosecute cases that we don't have sufficient proof. That would be unethical, and that notion that we don't take cases that people get in trouble if they're going to lose trials is completely untrue. It is the general rule in the office is you learn more from your losses than you do from your wins. And so that's completely untrue that people only file slam dunk cases, but they file cases that they ethically can.
Okay. Great, thank you for that answer. All right, so this couple of people asked kind of the same question along the lines of, so Patty, what are you most passionate about the role of district attorney?
I am most passionate about, number one, the people that I work with. We all share this mission of holding people accountable, serving victims. The people here are incredible. Lane County, this is a great time to be working as part of Lane County. I'm so excited for the turnaround that has happened, where we went from saying, well, we can't do anything because we don't have any resources, to what can we do with what we have? And that was started here, and it is part of the county culture now, and it's been terrific. And working with community partners in addressing public safety needs, and working on initiatives for children, on the boards of the Relief Nursery and Kids First, because children are the foundation for all of our change that we're going to make. If we're going to have any impact, it's going to be starting with kids. And so I'm passionate about everything that we do here. I really have been gratified by the opportunity to serve Lane County for over 30 years. And I hope that even when I'm retired, that I will continue not in an elected official capacity, but definitely in a role of serving the community.
Great. Thank you. And James, I'm going to ask you the same question. What about this role as district attorney really makes you passionate?
Well, I'm excited and passionate about changing the system. Again, it's one that doesn't work. I mean, to say that 80% of our cases that we send to her don't have enough evidence. It's preposterous. There's a million examples, but you know, it's very frustrating for police officers when their cases aren't prosecuted. I've explained that to officers. I've defended the DA's office over my career, explaining that, well, you know, the standard of proof is higher in court, so you know, you just can't go all the way. You got to understand that you can't prosecute every case, etc. But you know, when you catch someone in the act of burglarizing a place twice, and then they also had drugs on them, and you end up sending 27 charges, I think it was, on a guy, and then you're not going to prosecute. Well, that's a problem. You know, or another one where we had 19 charges on a gentleman, 3 different cases, half of which were felonies, including felon in possession of restricted weapon. Well, let's see, was he a felon? Yes, in 3 different states. Did he have a weapon? Yes. Was there video? Yes. Were there 3 police witnesses? Yes. Did he do this twice? Twice? Yes. None of that was prosecuted. And that's just 2 of the 19 charges. So what we did as a city is we spent our entire yearly budget for our jail facilities in Springfield and gave him 30 days. 30 days was all he got, because the DA's office wouldn't do a single thing to, again, a guy who's a felon in 3 different states. It's pull my hair out sometimes thinking about some of these cases, but those are the things I want to fix. I absolutely realize you can't prosecute every case, but there's got to be some fairness for all of Lincoln. And that's what I'm excited to bring to the office.
Okay. James, I'm going to ask you another question. I'm going to ask each of you both the same question. This will be the last question, and then I'm going to give you each a few minutes to just give us some closing remarks and maybe address anything that the other had mentioned in the process. So the question is, how important is integrity in the role of the district attorney? And I'll go ahead and let James start with that.
I think it's very important. And again, frankly, her conduct during this campaign has been atrocious. And in my opinion, you know, again, these frivolous complaints to the Bar Association, et cetera, that she's having other people do, or even the public information requests from her campaign manager without disclosing that. I mean, it's shady business. It's not what politics should be about, especially at the district attorney level. You've got to have transparency. You know, she's a busy person, and I realize that. She's got a lot of things to do. And yet she had time to have a secret meeting with our mayor and city council president on September 17th with her buddy, the sheriff, trying to convince them to, you know, to get rid of the Oak Ridge Police Department and go with the county sheriff instead. You could save a little bit of money. But what they didn't tell them, because they're not transparent, is that, well, but there might be some extra fees because, you know, they've got to send 2 officers to domestic violence incidents rather than we're just sending 1. And then, of course, they can raise the fee the next year, because once you get rid of your police department, it's gone. It's hard to get it back. It takes years and frankly, millions of dollars. But you know, just the idea of spending your time and resources trying to lobby cities to form a monopoly, basically, in law enforcement throughout the county is just abhorrent. And the idea has been floated in other cities as well. And I just don't think that's a good idea. And I think that city councils realize that, because if all law enforcement is through the county, you lose control over your police departments. Those sheriff's deputies are beholden to and answer only to the sheriff, not to the city council. But if you have your own police department, then you do have control, and you can tell your police department what to do.
Okay. Well, Patty, same question. Talk to us about integrity. Why is it important to the office of the district attorney?
integrity is everything, is both in the office of district attorney and as being a prosecutor and an attorney in Oregon. There is no case that is worth violating your rule of ethics, your obligation to the community to be honest and follow the rules of ethics. With regard to that meeting in Oak Ridge, yeah, there was a meeting in Oak Ridge because the police department is causing a huge risk of liability to the city of Oak Ridge. And I went up there with specific examples of risks of liability. And after that time was the putting a blanket on a chimney to smoke somebody out because my opponent had seen that in an old Western movie. Again, creating liability for the city of Oak Ridge. And the notion of making a public records request to the city of Oak Ridge for reports and to the sheriff's office. That's the only way I could get them to make this information public. And my campaign or anybody else in the world can make a public records request to any public body, and you don't have to tell them why you want it. With regard to the bar complaint, my opponent has held himself out to be a practicing attorney and yet filed that he was exempt from PLF as a non-law position for 4 years and didn't obtain that what's called professional liability fund coverage until April of this year after the bar complaint was filed about that very issue. He's telling the public that he's a practicing attorney and then turns around and says, well, I'm representing family members, so I don't need to pay into the professional liability fund. Lawyers in the state of Oregon are required to pay that unless you are under an authorized exemption, including government attorney. Government attorney doesn't count police officer being a lawyer on the side. Integrity is everything, and holding yourself out to be something that you aren't is lying to the public and have no business being in a position that requires integrity.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's going to conclude our questions from the audience. We're getting short on time, and I definitely want to give each of you the opportunity to make some closing remarks. I'll give you about 3 minutes apiece. Tell us about your campaign, your website, anything you want to say to our viewers in these last few minutes. Patty, I'll let you go ahead and start.
Well, again, I would like to just point out that this race really does matter. It is oftentimes something that the public doesn't think about, who your district attorney is, but absolutely who is in that position matters, and this race matters. And I encourage people to read all of the materials that are out there about this race and about the two of us to make a determination that experience matters. This is a hard job. This really is a hard job, and you are making a lot of judgment calls that depend upon having experience to do that, to make the right call. And honesty and integrity matter. Absolutely, you have to follow the rules, and you have to be a person of absolute integrity to hold this position so that you can have the public's trust. And my campaign website is daperlow.org. Please go there and see my history in the office, my history in Oregon. Please go there, see the people who are supporting me so that you can see that your neighbors are the ones who are supporting me, and the businesses you support are the ones who are supporting me. And just get out and vote. Thank you.
Yes, please, definitely get out and vote. James, I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and tell our viewers and audience anything you would like them to know about you.
Sure. Well, there are lots of exemptions from PLF insurance. And yes, I've been practicing law since 2009. First of all, in Washington State, which is where I started with my first bar association, you don't need PLF insurance at all to represent anybody. But yes, I have been practicing law under multiple exemptions. Unfortunately, you can only choose one when you click the box annually. And it is true, my primary job is as a police officer. I made that choice to go from federal court, where I was making 6 figures, well, just under, taking a very heavy pay cut to work on the streets as a police officer. That was my choice. But I still have been practicing law on the side. I have not been having my own individual clients, but I've been helping other lawyers with their clients and their issues. And anyway, it'll all come out when I respond to that complaint and that is settled. But there's lots of ways to practice law without having to have PLF insurance. As for that cabin fire issue, again, transparency, really? I mean, we released our reports. I released the LCS, the county sheriff's reports, and then I was told I had to take them down. Love to release them. The blanket thing, yeah, I'll admit, not one of the greatest outside the box ideas I've had, but it had no effect on what happened to that gentleman who blew himself up in the cabin, just like he told everyone 15 times. And the blanket trick, it didn't work. I couldn't get the chimney covered, took the blanket down, and we're talking 5 hours before SWAT showed up, and then he blew himself up. So that's the reason there's no blanket mentioned in any of the reports. I mentioned that offhand. It's something I tried to do, just like I also tried to spray pepper spray in there. But yeah, I'm willing to try outside the box things. I fought a fire with snowballs 3 months ago during the winter. It was actually pretty effective. They didn't train me to do that at the academy either, but yeah, it worked. I'm really trying to make a difference for our community. That's the reason I'm running. You know, I'm not, I said when I first started running that I'd rather be skiing. That's true. In fact, even more so now that I haven't been able to ski for a couple months. If the DA was doing her job, I wouldn't be running. I'm running because I feel like I have to. Somebody's got to stand up and change our system. I realize it's a very tough fight. I've been through the ringer. You know, 2 hours before the last debate, I got a call from a reporter because they got an anonymous tip that I'd been arrested by the FBI or some other federal law enforcement organization. Really? Obviously just trying to rattle me a little bit, but it's not going to work. You know, we'll see what's next, but it's a tough job to be the DA, and I realize that. But you should look at, you know, what you're getting. For me, you know, you're getting 4 years for sure. I'm going to do the whole term. With Ms. Perlow, we're not sure. Her answer was kind of coy when she was asked about that. It sounds more like she's going to, you know, serve as long as she can, and then try to probably put in someone else in a couple of years, like her predecessor did. So just think about what you're getting when you're voting. I'm willing to stand up to big interests. I think I proved that when I sued my own police department that I was working for, and I, you know, that whistleblowing lawsuit was tough. You know, went through 3 years of hell, but I knew I had to do it because it's the right thing to do, and other people were going to get hurt if I didn't stand up for myself and for the people that were willing to tell the truth in that case. And that's what I bring to the office is integrity and courage. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that concludes our questions. I want to thank both of you sincerely on behalf of the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. This was very late in the process, and we apologize that it took us this long. I know ballots are in hand, and I got mine right here. So want to encourage our viewers to definitely, for those who were able to tune in, wonderful. If you weren't able to, or if you'd like to share this forum or any of our candidate forums we've done, you know, like I said, many, those can all be found on the eugenechamber.com website. So please, if you're not sure who to vote for and you want to learn more about the candidates, please consider us a resource for that. So with that, I will excuse you both to your evening and let you get on with it, and wish you both the best of luck in the race.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.